This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and with only 2 matches played last weekend due to the freezing weather, it's not going to take us long to review them. Dale Clancy with me again, so let's talk about the 2 games that were played on Saturday. National 1, Highland against Biggar. They played out a 15-15 draw, while Newton Stewart beat Kirkcaldy 41-17 in National 2.
Yeah, the Highland Biggar game, I think that, that's interesting that game went ahead. Obviously, we know that the weather conditions can sometimes deal a blow to the kind of artificial surfaces, but great there was some rugby on, and I think it obviously eases the burden later on in the campaign if the teams can get those games underway. But yeah, I was surprised. I got in touch with Craig Borthwick actually the beginning in the morning, and he was saying he was en route on the way up to Highland, and I thought he was just going to be turning a bit back around. But yeah, it was great that the game went ahead, and I think it shows that Biggar are on an upward curve at the moment. They've hit a little bit of a purple patch. Yes, they've not won all their games in the last 5-6 games, but they're competing against a team like Highland away from home, who are towards the top of the league, and only a few weeks ago we were talking about them hanging on the coattails of Ayr. So that's a big result for them, and as you say, you're looking at National 2 with that Newton Stewart result. It's a big win as well, and I think potentially when you've got these weekends that come up and you're expecting the games not to go ahead, sometimes that can work 2 ways. It can mean the pressure can be off teams, but sometimes it gets you in the wrong frame of mind, and it just does look like that Kirkcaldy perhaps were in the wrong frame of mind. So a solid victory for Newton Stewart.
Most games were called off on Friday. Others left it till Saturday, despite the fact that the forecast was always going to be around -7. Some people saying they were surprised that clubs left it to Saturday to call off games when the situation was unlikely to improve. And of course, the logistics of people deciding what they're going to do on a Saturday. What's your own take on that?
Well, you can look at that 2 ways. I totally agree. I think that rugby has changed drastically over the last 20-30 years, and there's a lot of pressures on people nowadays to work commitments, family commitments, and I think that with the Saturday being the nucleus of everything that you do and aim towards that week is gone. But the other side of it is the fact that some games left it late and still went ahead, and yes, it's not a high percentage in the national picture that actually went ahead at the weekend, but it's good to get some games on. And sometimes as well, like, you've got to bear in mind that yes, the players and the pundits and the media and everybody who's going to be going to these games, it's a big inconvenience because those games aren't going ahead, but there's a social aspect to it as well. That the club is a community hub, and they potentially could still have sponsors going ahead. There might be people who it is their focus that weekend and they want to catch up with some mates, and the bars will still be open. There'll still be that entertainment on of some degree in those club rooms. So it's different from whatever perspective and you're going to look through. But potentially some clubs as well, they could get a double whammy at sponsors, and that's great for the club and the coffers, but it depends who you are. But I do think that just a bit of common sense needs to prevail at times. But it was good to see some games on, and perhaps some other games could have been called a bit sharper.
We'll have a look at what's happening this weekend, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of rugby on. It's going to be around about 7 degrees plus this time, so we shouldn't have a problem. It'll be very wet though, having said that. But one thing we will address right at the start of the programme is the Cup, the League Cup, the Shield, the Regional Bowls have all been announced for next year, around about March time.
I think it's, looking over it and looking over all the competitions, for me it was an opportunity to then go to the next level with the Cup competition. I think the Silver Saturday that we had last year was good. There was success, it was a showcase for some teams, but it was almost slightly diluted. I think the quality probably wasn't as high as it has been in the past. From there, I think there needs to be then the next step, and I don't think this is it. Looking at the draw and looking at teams and who's in it, who's out of it, it is really diluted, and I think it's a shame to see the teams, especially from the region that I'm from, opting not to participate. In teams like GHK as well, it's obviously been a difficult season so far for them, and they want to focus on whatever their outcome is at the end of the season or that time of the year. But it's an opportunity to participate in a cup competition and get more experience for your club and your players. So I think it's slightly disappointing that is the stance and the kind of the route that club rugby has went down to have voluntary exclusions from the competition. I just think that's pretty poor. It doesn't look like a well thought out process. When you start looking at it, when you look at the cup competition and glancing over, and seeing 14 teams will be involved, and you start to think, we've got 20 teams in the top 2 divisions. Surely there's a different way to shake that up. I do think that, yeah, it's not something that really grips me at the moment. Not at all. I think to have... I was looking across as well, and there was one of the competitions, and there was a team's name that sticks out like a sore thumb. Peebles. I think the teams that they are beside in that list of names, it's a bit disheartening to see that. I don't know why the decision is. I don't know if you know why the teams...
Well, the Borders teams want to concentrate on getting the Border League finished and complete, and the Cup will get in the way. That's the official word there. As far as Hawick's concerned, obviously they are the holders and want to defend the title.
So when's this decision being made? Because I don't get the point in that. If a team like Peebles, who've not got an opportunity to win the Border League, are going to be in a competition that they could potentially compete in, why are they opting to withdraw? I just think that's a strange decision for me.
I can't put any blame on the SRU because they're obviously organising it and picking up the pieces, if you like, of clubs actually pulling out. But it's certainly created a lot of interest and comments on Facebook and other social media platforms. Some people like Paul Pringle, for instance, ex-Jedforest player, now with Berwick, who remembers the old days when there were very, very small teams going up to play big teams. It was a glamour tie. There was lots of points in it, very one-sided affairs, but they always remembered the experience. Fast forward, though, 10, 15 years since that happened, and health and safety has to come into play now. Yeah,
rugby's changed as well, in that time period. It used to be quite a quick, really skillful game where there's a lot about muscle and physicality now, and it is completely changed. And the difference between, say Hawick at the top of the pyramid at the moment to teams lower, I even think, again, not to kind of be too disparaging of my ex-team, but the difference between Hawick and Peebles is quite stark, and that's only going down a couple of divisions. It's not football, in terms of doing a cup competition like that, you've got an element of competition there. I don't think in amateur rugby you've got the same thing, but I know you've obviously mentioned changes and tweaks to the cup in the past, and your idea, but there's something to do to make it more valuable, and it's not at the moment. And I think the fact that clubs are not wanting to participate, and again, I'm not putting any blame on the clubs, because if they're not wanting to participate, they don't see the value in it, and they're not invested in the culture of it either. Whether it's something that you're playing for positions that if you finish in the top 8 of the Premiership or the next 8, you've got a home or away tie or something, and for the next season those top 16 teams will compete in the Cup, the next 16 teams will compete in the Shield. That might be something to look at, to try and just have a simple way of qualifying to have an actual cup competition. So yeah, I think there's certainly, that's not the remedy for me. I'm not buying that at all. I just think that's really diluted. Well, this is the Scottish Club Rugby podcast, and we should get a full programme of games this weekend, as I say. So let's begin with the Premiership and remind us about the league table. We have Hawick at the top on 56, Marr 52, Currie 47, but a game in hand, Musselburgh 39 in that fourth playoff position at the moment. Edinburgh Accies have 36, Heriots Blues 34, Kelso 30, Selkirk 25, Glasgow Hawks 22 and Jedforest 4. And Glasgow Hawks versus Currie is the first game out today. Here's Hawks head coach, and that's Andy Hill.
Obviously, it was another disappointing week with the games cancelled. However, it was pleasing to see that we weren't the only game cancelled this week, with all the games in the Premiership being off. So it allowed us the chance to get guys fit, so we're probably in a stronger position we've been in a long time. Only injuries really that remain on the list are, long-term ones that we've had for a while. So that means that selection is largely unchanged for what it would have been last week. Some of the changes that have taken place there: James Imrie comes in to start at 9, which he has done most of the season. Eric Davey has been removed from the squad to play with the 20s next week. V. Wales and Rapham and Cotton Wool, as they've sustained a couple of injuries. Ewan Muirhead comes on at the bench. We thought he'd played his last game for us, but given the cancellations we've had, he is able still to play in these last 5 games after his head knock he sustained v Marr. And the forwards, Ryan Howie and Andrew Syme, also returned from head knocks, and we'll expect to see Sione Halafihi and Stephen Leckie add their experience to the team as well. It's always an enjoyable game, v Currie. Going through there, they've always they're probably going through their most difficult season. I think it would be fair to say that they've had in the new Premiership with the transition of players that they've had. They've lost experienced guys over the last couple of years in terms of Fair Scott, Mike Vernal last year, and Gregor Hunter, which are obviously big players for them. But the one thing you'll always expect from a Currie team is that Mark and Ali have them really well prepared. They're two great coaches with great experience, and Currie play a great brand of rugby, so it makes it for a really entertaining game. But our big focus is, and we've said, is that our season is all about firsts, and we've yet to beat Currie in this new Premiership, so that's got to be what we're trying to do this weekend when we get the chance to go back to Balgray and play, because despite a few really close games against Currie, they've always come out the better side of the result. So that's got to be a focus again, turning that for the boys this weekend. So we look forward to getting back to Balgray and taking a real test against a team who are aspiring to be top 4 to see where we're at.
So Andy Hill, Hawks haven't won since beating Herriot's Blues back in October. They haven't played for 3 weeks either, so it'll take some time to bed in, and you don't really want to go bedding in against Currie.
No, but this is probably one of those fixtures again that it probably suits them. Currie are really turgid and bulky up front, and I think Hawks are the same, and especially in the back division as well. There's a couple of big backs that the Hawks have that are really direct, and they bring that aggression, which I think will suit a city team likes of Currie. So there could be a little bit of a kind of complement of styles in terms of both of those sides. So you hear Andy Hill there talking about going back to Balgray, and they'll be hoping to make home advantage count. But again, you look at that, you run down the tables earlier on. Currie are in third position, but they've got a game in hand. They're breathing down the necks of Marr, but also in their coattails they've got Musselburgh. So they'll be fully focused on terms of what they need to do, and whether there's a few Currie players listening in saying that they're having one of their most difficult campaigns, that could be a little bit of a little bit of fuel for the Currie fire.
Hawick against Jedforest is the next game. We're going to hear from David Grieve, the coach at Jedforest, and of course head coach at Hawick is Matty Douglas.
It was really disappointing not to get rugby last week, but I think the whole of the country was in the same boat. Really cold conditions, and meant that we had a free Saturday for the first time in 12-13 weeks, so it was good to get a break, able to refresh some boys and give a few boys the chance to recover that were carrying a couple of knocks. So probably came at the right time, but again we've missed out on a top of the table clash with Currie. But look, that's rescheduled for the 6th of January, so we're going to have to be on the ball over the Christmas period, and as we look into a tough fixture that first week back into it. But look, attention turns to another border derby of the season, second last one, and we're at home to Jed. We know how good a side Jed can be on their day, and look, they've had a tough season. I think everybody can kind of see how hard it's been for them. I know it would be frustrating as a coach to go through what they're currently going through, but hopefully that kind of break of last week, and I'll have got them a few players back, and they'll be able to pick a strong squad. But look, Jed, when they play with tempo and play with width, they're a tough side to beat. They've got a lot of quality, youngsters in there, and also a quality backline. So look, the way we approach games, we're not taking this for granted. We'll have to work hard for any sort of points, but we feel we're at a stage now that we can really kick on, and at the end of the day we're getting into the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season, and we need to start hitting some form, and that's a challenge to these players. We've put bits and pieces together, but I'm looking for that 80-minute complete performance, and I think the players know that it needs to start happening. So look, we'll go into like any other game. We'll try and win the set piece. We'll try and be dominant in attack and defence, and try and take our opportunities, and we're getting better at that. I think the last couple of weeks it's got some try bonuses in there. So look, we'll look to play our own game, but we know how tough a challenge this will be when Jed are looking for their first win of the season. So again, squad wise, it's the exact same squad that was picked to play Currie last week, so a bit of consistency in selection, and try and reward a few boys to give them an opportunity that they didn't get last week. So look, we're looking forward to another border derby, and I know there's a big lunch on before the game, so we'll look to put a performance on in front of our home supporters.
No bigger challenge at the moment in club rugby than playing Hawick, especially at Hawick. They're the double winners for a reason. They've not just got the best team, they've probably got the best squad as well. But for us, there's no pressure on us. We just have to go up there, just try and be positive in attack, positive in defence, and just look to score points and give us something to build on, even for the next couple of games. I think we've got Heriots actually next week now, so let's give us something to build on for that game. To be fair to us at the moment, all the games are tough, but we just got to go there and have a go.
Well, the last time at Riverside Park it was 61-0. The first target is to get some points on the board at Mansfield Park.
Yeah, I think, this is probably an easier fixture to look at. It's top versus bottom. There's 52 points between them in terms of what they've banked at the moment. There is a huge gulf in terms of where these two teams are at the moment. And realistically, you're going to say that if Matty Douglas's team don't go away from this game with 5 points in the bag, they won't have met their target. I think the more difficult thing in this game will be achieving that 80-minute performance, because Jed will make things really difficult. They are a good side. There's a lot of good quality rugby players in there. The thing is there's a gulf between the depth in both of these squads, the consistency that they've had as well, and that will play out on Saturday. That will be evident. But in terms of Jedforest, they're going to make it a real challenge for Matty Douglas's team to meet that target of playing for 80 minutes, because it's a border derby, because they will make it stuffy. There'll be times in the game where Jed will have their tails up, and that's what will challenge Hawick. So, they've had a week off, both teams have been able to replenish, but yeah, you would imagine that there's going to be a sizeable home victory there.
Well, there's an Edinburgh derby on Saturday. Heriots Blues against Musselburgh, 6th against 4th, and that one's looking to be pretty interesting as well. Heriots down in 6th place now, Musselburgh in 4th, 5 points between them.
The game will come on after this as well. There's a lot of interesting games in the Premiership this weekend, but you would say Heriots Blue versus Musselburgh, that is almost, for Musselburgh, it could be a knockout game. If they can get the scalp at Golden Acre, they can put some distance in between themselves and Heriots Blues, and then Marr might do them a favour as well against Edinburgh Accies. So it's a big weekend for those three teams which are in 4th, 5th and 6th.
Well, Marr will face Edinburgh Accies, Fullerton Park. Accies in 5th at the moment. Marr looking for a double over Accies, although it was very close early in the season. Marr winning that one 20 points to 17. Marr will have their head coach back from South Africa as well, and that of course is Kenny Diffenthal.
The boys are very disappointed at not having any rugby at last weekend, so are raring to go. The last time we played Accies, we didn't really put our best foot forward, so hoping to improve on that performance anyway. But we are under no illusions of the challenge ahead. So, yeah, hopefully the weather holds out and we can have some rugby this weekend. As I say, the guys are raring to go. So hopefully Saturday brings decent weather so we can have a good game of rugby for everybody to enjoy.
Now, Accies have lost their last 3 games. Marr looking to be a lot more comfortable than they were when we saw them against Hawick.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for Marr this weekend, is to obviously make home advantage count, put a little bit of pressure on them as well, because the kick-off times are different, and it's probably not as highfalutin as what the kind of kick-off times in football are, but messages will ring out in Mansfield Park what that result is going to be at Fullerton. So, at the time during that fixture, they'll know what their objective is. So, the pressure's on Marr to make sure that they can stick on the coattails of Hawick, but I said it just before about the game between Heriots Blues and Musselburgh. It's a big game for Edinburgh Accies, and this could be almost another one of those kind of last chance saloons. They're getting a lot of them, but it's one of those opportunities that they really need to grasp and take the game to Marr. The difference in these two sides as well is the fact that Edinburgh Accies will play an expansive, fast-paced game of rugby. Marr are really attritional in the way that they go about their business. They've got really good playmakers in there as well, and they've got finishers. The Bickerstaffs are good, but likes of Sturgeon controlling things. So they've got really key personnel. So almost a clash, like a kind of clashing styles there. They're both slightly different, but it's just who's going to get control of that game, and it's a big one for both teams.
I mentioned that Marr were not looking that comfortable against Hawick, which is true, but they certainly looked very comfortable in their next match against Selkirk at Philiphaugh, and of course they didn't play last week against Kelso. So it'll be, as you say, very interesting to see back at Fullerton Park how they do against Edinburgh Accies in that one. We'll be certainly keeping an eye on that. Well, finally, our commentary game on Saturday on Rugby Radio from the Premiership, Selkirk versus Kelso, and first we're going to listen to the thoughts of Selkirk head coach Sesh Henderson.
Exciting for us, because last night we just concentrated on what all about us and what we were going to do in terms of our attacking and defence. A really good session back in. I think the boys have, even though disappointed the game was off last week. It was an opportunity for some niggles just to get a wee bit more rest. The boys came back in refreshed and worked extremely hard, working on the key fundamentals of our attack and defence, going into Saturday's game, which was going to be an intense 80 minutes of rugby. It was the last time upon the park, and we just squeezed over for a win. We were trying the last couple of minutes. And, you know, I'll take that again this week, but we know what we need to do against Kelso, because they're a smart side, physical side, led by Bruce McNeil, you know. But for us, it's all about getting the right territory in the park, everybody knowing their roles, executing them, and getting that physicality right at the breakdown. When the breakdown against Kelso and get go forward ball, then I think we'll find space, and I think, you know, our backs have really come on the last couple of games, some good tries. So we're hoping to create that space for them, and, you know, and get over the line with a much needed win at home.
Selkirk head coach Sesh Henderson. Now, Director of Rugby at Kelso is Neil Hinnigan. I spoke with him earlier this week to find out more about the club in what has been a pretty historic season for them.
Yeah, I mean, overall, obviously pretty pleased with how things have went. We got off to a reasonably good start with 2 draws, and, you know, looking back now, you know, some people say 2 wins, we could have been sitting 4th or whatever at that point, but there's also the fact that it could have been 2 defeats. So yeah, we're quite happy where we are. We're challenging ourselves week on week, rather than, you know, we did have goals, and we continue to be actually hitting those goals. They weren't too unrealistic for our first year up, and I think that's, everyone would probably have thought that was an obvious thing. So we've kept it simple, and we're now challenging the squad week on week, and we're actually making a good job of that as well. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
What was the target initially when you got into the Premiership?
Yeah, well, most people would say, you know, you've got to stay up, and I mean, that's an obvious statement, but we aimed a bit higher. We thought if we could finish in the top 6, then that would be a really good season. Now, there's obviously a prize of being top 4. You know, I think the top 3 is out of reach. I think everyone would agree with that, but being 4th would be a possibility for us, but we never ever challenged ourselves for that. We've never mentioned it. We've just mentioned being top 6. If we can finish 5th, 6th, even 7th wouldn't be the end of the world. So that's been the overall target, was to be in that mid-table and out of the relegation battle was the main objective.
And you certainly achieved that. You're above Jedforest and Selkirk and Glasgow Hawks as well, and a couple of good wins, and all of a sudden, you know, you aren't that far off the top 4 positions. You mentioned the top 3, the Hawks, the Curries and the Marrs, of course, who are in a league of their own, let's be honest about that. But you did struggle away from home against them, yeah. But you do have them at Poynter Park, and we've seen what happened, a big turnaround against Hawick.
Yeah, of course, and you know, these are the challenges we face, and it's picking your battles, Stu. You know, you've got to look at where we are as a team and as a squad, and we just, you know, we can't just take on everyone full boona all the time, because we've not got a big enough squad at this point, and we're ever building on it. But yeah, those matches away from home were really tough, and you know, if anything, it grounded us very quickly, and it gave us a bit of a shock, especially Hawick away. And since then we've been ever improving, I think. So yeah, having the likes of Marr and Currie still at home, you know, to beat one of those sides would be a big statement on our first year up. So, you know, it'd be great to be able to achieve that. But as everyone knows, that's a very difficult thing to do, and especially, you know, when you're just finding your feet in the Premiership.
Everyone likes to think that their home ground is their fortress and very hard to beat. One team that did beat you, though, early on was Selkirk, and you've got Selkirk this week. So revenge on the mind.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, in a border derby, you know, you want to win every time, no matter what the circumstances, and probably is a little bit extra on this one, given that they came to Poynter and beat us, and it was a match that we felt, you know, in many ways probably Selkirk stole it, but I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, because to get that situation they had to work hard and stay in the game, and you know, they did that very, very well. I think we got the kicking game all wrong that day, and looking back at it, you know, it was one that probably got away, but you know, we in a border derby you could play well all game, and the opposition doesn't and still beat you, and that's the great thing about border derbies. Anything can happen. I don't think home advantage is even a big thing in a border derby. I think, you know, sometimes the pressure on the home side can be harder, and hopefully that's the case for Selkirk this week. They maybe maybe feel they slightly need to win more as us. I don't know how they feel about it, but I would say that, you know, if we can make amends for that defeat at Poynter by winning at Philplock, then that would balance itself out for us.
And how's the team looking for this week?
Yeah, pretty good. I think we've got a fully fit squad, give or take. No excuses or complaints that way. I think we've not had a game for 2 weeks, Stu, so we're actually a bit undercooked. Probably that's probably going to be our biggest problem, is that we've not had rugby for around 3 weeks when we play the Selkirk. So that's a problem. But you know, that's what happens in a season. You've got to overcome that. So.
You've got a few old heads in there, Bruce McNeil, Hasty, Tates and these sort of names, but a lot of youngsters coming through who have really made the mark this season. Yeah,
I mean, I'm always more excited about the younger guys coming through than obviously the more established players like say Bruce McNeil and Keith Melbourne and these guys, Hasty and that. They've all, you know, you expect that from them, but we've taken not a gamble. I think it was a fair, you know, these guys have earned their space. They've trained hard. The likes of Murray Woodcock's having a great season. Marsh Nasanti's now involved with the training squad with the 20s. He's in the final 32 or whatever. I mean, he might get cut from it yet, but he's in there. And we've got Angus McGregor, Loosehead and Archie Barber. You know, Archie's having a good season at fullback. So there's a lot of excitement around these youngsters. And, you know, it's been a while since Kelso's had players that are in the 20 squad and things like that, and we're immensely proud of them. That's one thing, we really are proud of them down at Poynter Park, and we'll do everything we can to keep improving them, and we're trying to be this overall Premiership side, not just taking part in it. We want to be developing players for the future.
And a word about Dwayne Patterson as well, who's really come on strong in the last couple of years and has now really worked his way into, well, certainly we saw him play for the south of Scotland in the matches last season. A guy who's got a tremendous future. Yeah,
Dwayne has. I mean, Dwayne can be frustrating for us at times as well, because he's so good that he takes a lot on himself as well, and he's always hungry to get on the ball, and it's absolutely outstanding. That's what you want from players like him, and he can turn a game himself. He can win you a match. He just needing to get that bit game management about him, and he can find his position and stick to that as well. So he's got a lot of work on as well, doing, but he has got all the attributes you'd want from a player. His tackling's good. His defence is really good for his size. You know, pound for pound, he's a strong guy. Does a lot of gym work. His kicking ability is obviously great. You know, he's got feet work, he's got pace. You know, he's got everything you want. So he's got a big future. I mentioned at the start of the interview about the fact that Kelso have come up for the first time this century into the Premiership. One of the reasons for that is because you traditionally had a lot of farm workers who were available for probably only half the season, if that sometimes. Yeah. But you've managed to get over that now. How did you get round that issue? Yeah, I mean, we've still got farmers around the squad. Obviously that is a part of the Kelso makeup, and there's been a bit of change in culture and how we do things, and they'll tell you themselves, the ones that are involved in that they've had to come in and maybe play through the Sharks setup and train for 2 or 3 weeks at a time to catch up, and then once they've caught up, they're obviously fair game to be selected. So that's actually encouraged some of them to maybe make an effort to get there when they can. So it has a knock-on effect, but to counteract it, we really had to take a harder line. So we did, and luckily for us, it's paid dividends. It's not always an easy thing to do, especially if you're heavy reliant on them. But luckily for us, as I say, we've got a bigger squad that we can shuffle things about a little bit to make it work. And as Director of Rugby at Kelso, you're looking after the Kelso Sharks, you mentioned, the second team, but also there's the Kelso Harlequins, there's the Kelso Ladies as well, so it's an all-inclusive club, and in fact the only club in the Borders at the moment that has a women's team that's actually performing at sort of national level, which is great for the future, and the Quins, of course, are through to the youth final as well. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're really, really supportive of Kelso Harlequins. I mean, that's our lifeline, you know, that's where the heartbeat is. If you know, it's the middle of the road for players coming through, and lately we've had some cracking players. Obviously, we've just spoke about them coming through that system, and then before that, there's obviously the high school pitch in Murray Hasty doing YDO, and the girls' system starting to be the same. I mean, it's taken time, but they're always working at it, and they put a tremendous amount of effort in to try and keep that going as well. So there's a lot of people at the club making a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work. It's a huge collective effort from a lot of people to make this what it is now, and hopefully it continues to grow.
Neil Hinnigan, and before that Sesh Henderson. So we've heard from both clubs, and that's our commentary game on Saturday. Ewan Welsh will be in the chair along with Scott Tomlinson, so we're looking forward to that one. But Selkirk winning at Kelso earlier in the season, Kelso out to even things up.
Yeah, there was a lot of highlight reels as well from that fixture. Selkirk scoring a phenomenal try, getting back into the game as well, and it's arguably one of those games that Kelso should have seen over the line. You know, one of those games that perhaps has gotten away from them, and might they come back at the end of the season and start to look at that as an opportunity missed? They might, but they need to win this game and kind of dish out a bit of revenge to Selkirk. But you know, Selkirk this season have been relatively strong at home. You know, they've put in some good performances, but obviously they've only got 4 wins so far this season. I don't think the league table lies in terms of the way that their campaign has gone so far this season. You know, Kelso have still got the objective. I think, you know, I agree with Neil there. I don't think anybody will agree that third position is achievable. I think that's well gone, but there is still an outside chance that they can squeeze into that 4th position, but it means they're going to have to go on a run, and the run is probably going to have to start this Saturday.
Well, that wraps up the Premiership for now. Let's have a look at National 1, the table as it stands at the moment from a couple of weeks ago, apart from the Highland and Biggar draw, 15 all. Ayr at the top, 58 points. Highland in second, 39, so they picked up 2 points on Saturday. Glasgow Accies, 34. Melrose, 34. Watsonians, 33. Gala, 33. GHA, 30. That's as tight as it gets in the middle section. Biggar adding a couple of points to their total. They're on 24. Dundee 18 and GHK 13. So first up is Ayr against Gala at Millbrae. Ayr unbeaten, but Gala undefeated in their last 4 matches. Coming up, Ewan Swinton, Gala's Director of Rugby. But first, let's hear head coach of Ayr, and that is Grant Anderson.
Obviously, our game was cancelled on Saturday, although I wasn't overly happy about the way it was cancelled, purely from the point of view that we were meant to be playing at Peffer Mill on the 4G at Edinburgh Uni, and there was a ladies' game on before us. I think they were due to kick off at 11 a.m. So after it was announced on social media that the ladies' game was on, we then got a phone call to say that the men's game was cancelled. Read into that what you want, but certainly some of our boys were already en route to Watsonians, going direct, and different things like that. So it was a bit disappointing. Boys were a bit gutted because they were obviously keen to play. However, can't really comment on that any further, and I'll not go into any more detail, but yeah, we were disappointed. So our attention obviously turns to Gala on Saturday. Looking forward to it. Nice to be back at home. Again, we've now got 2, in fact 3. We've got 3 at home in a row. Got Gala, GHK and then Highland on the 6th. So nice for us to be at home for a wee while. We had a really, really good training week last week, actually, before the scheduled Watsons game. Lots of boys putting their hands up. It was really competitive. Obviously the weather was quite cold, but actually it kind of enhanced our session a wee bit. Boys were keen to get going. We played at good intensity, good pace. Looked at a few issues we had previously against Melrose, so that was all good. We come into last night, you know, we didn't do a review obviously because we hadn't played, so we just worked on a few underlying themes that I've maybe been trying to develop, but haven't had, you know, perhaps enough time or as much time as I would like. So we did that. It was really good. Lots of guys putting their hand up again. 1 or 2 guys maybe didn't train the way I'd hoped they would have. So that'll probably be reflected in my selection this week. Even though we didn't play last week, I'm not one for just keeping the same 20 guys. That does nothing for kind of competition or standards at training. So they all knew last night that, you know, all those names had fallen back off the team sheet and I would pick a fresh team for this Saturday's challenge. Gala, different team to Watsonians. You know, they'll be physical up front or physical across the pitch. We ended up in a bit of an arm wrestle that day down at Netherdale, which we managed to come out on the right side of. It wasn't one of my happiest or most pleasing performances that the team put in, but we had a job to do that day and we managed to do that, so I was pleased with that. We'll look to execute, and this was a massive theme for us last night. It's basic skills to a high standard under pressure, with our decision making and our technique and our ball carries and lots of different things that we're trying to do. That will be the focus for us on Thursday and then going into Saturday. We're obviously wanting to continue with our focus for this block of 4 games. We're now into the third of 4 games, so we've set process targets for that, and I'm looking to make sure that we execute those. I'm looking for a big defensive display as well, because when we played Gala down there, I felt like we were defensively a little soft. Gala had done their homework on us, so that was interesting to see. They posed us different questions, different problems, and we handled that quite well. So looking for that to happen again on Saturday, and the boys are desperate to get back at it. So yeah, looking forward to Saturday.
When we played Ayr at Gala, we were their equal in virtually every facet of the game, other than maybe a wee bit of confidence to finish off moves. And if we'd played that game a couple of weeks later, I think that the way that our confidence and ability to finish off the fast-flowing moves that our backs are producing in concert with the forwards, then I think we might have pulled a bit of a shock out the bag there. I certainly think that's the mindset we've got to take up to Ayr on Saturday. It's pretty clear what game plan they will play to. They will look for penalties, they'll kick to touch, and they'll use their very able pack to tremendous effect, I'm sure. So we need to be careful about penalties. We need to be ultra aggressive in the forwards. We do not need to be in any way passive against them. And then when we do get our hands on the ball, we need to trust the fast-flowing play that we have in our armour. It's certainly not a situation where we go up with any kind of fear of playing against Ayr. We know that we can take them on, particularly out wide. So I think that we seek as much parity as possible in the forwards, and then get guys like Scott Peppers, Murray Wilson, and the rest running at them hard, and with the real determination that we've shown recently. Our backs don't go down easily, so I think the chances of keeping the ball live and open are very real, and we have a game that can give Ayr a real challenge. There's no doubt that Ayr are the predominant force in the league just now, but that makes them a tremendous target. It's fun to go and play against teams like that, because you're not going with anyone's expectations on your shoulders, but we're becoming a side that can be quietly confident that we can do things, and I think a big performance is certainly coming along for us, and who knows, it might be this weekend. So we'll travel up to Ayr full of confidence, very realistic about what we're facing, what we need to do to counter it, but we've got ability. Let's go there and show it.
So Melrose found it very tough playing against 10-try Ayr. Can Gala do any better?
I think off the back of that soundbite, I think the confidence that Ewan Swinton has, you've got to have confidence in your own side, but I don't think that's going to be, it's not going to be a successful outcome going to Mowbray this weekend for Gala. The one thing that they can probably try and hang their hat on is they've already frustrated Ayr. And also that, yes, Ayr were formidable in their victory against Melrose a couple of weeks ago, but they did leak points. And I think that, if they're able to play expansive rugby, which Gala have got an exciting bunch of backs, they could pose some questions to Ayr, but it would be completely naive of me to say that I think that Gala can go there and get a result. I think Ayr start this as heavy favourites. It'll be lucky number 13 for them, I think, victory this weekend. So, yeah, they're romping their way at the Premiership, and Gala, I think, are just going to be another speed bump on the road to the promised land.
A couple of interesting things. Of course, Grant Anderson had 2 dodgy weeks, really, hasn't he, as far as away is concerned, because obviously not happy with what happened leading up to the cancellation, as he says, postponement, of course we would call it, because it will get played eventually, but the postponement of the Watsonians game, and of course before that with the pitch at Dundee, so he'll be delighted to be back at Mowbray, I think.
Yeah, he's that's been a few weeks, and he's got more greetings in Clinton's cards, but he's certainly, he's obviously got an axe to grind against the things that have been going against his side, and but again, I'm a big fan of Ayr. I think the way that they carry themselves as a club, and that's tongue in cheek about Grant Anderson, because he speaks really well, and he's guiding that team really, really impressively, at the top of the National 1 division. But yeah, they've had a couple of occasions over the last few weeks where, and even the Melrose game, there was a bit of frost at the front of the stand, and you thought there was going to be Frostgate Mark II from years gone by, but they managed to just knuckle down. They got it kind of trounced over, got it warmed up, and the game was good to go. So yeah, an unfavourable pitch, then back to Mowbray where it was icy, and then the women's rugby was going ahead and the men's game was called off. So he's had a rough few weeks, as Grant Anderson.
Well, of course, it's interesting looking at the table because you have Glasgow Accies in third place on 34, and you go all the way down to seventh place GHA, only 4 points behind, and in between that you've got, as I say, Melrose also on 34 and what's known as Gala on 33 as well. Really tight, and it's just a shame in a way because Ayr are so far ahead that all these matches are turning into dead rubbers a wee bit.
I think you look at that league and the game that's still to be played is GHA versus Glasgow Accies, so there's a potential that GHA could actually jump above them all, and that makes it even more tight at the top of that division in terms of that little trunk in the middle. But I think it's probably a bit disingenuous to say that it's not as an exciting a league. I think you need to take your hat off to Ayr.
Yeah, it's Ayr that's caused that to happen, isn't it?
It's Ayer's good form. They've recruited really well over the summer. They've got a great influence there from Grant Anderson, who's brought some really key figures to the club that's helped them get back onto that platform. And I said it last week, the Premiership's a better place with a team like Ayr in it. So I hope they do continue to go from strength to strength. The teams in the league will test them for the rest of the season, but if you're to ask me, can Ayr realistically go through the rest of the season unbeaten? There's a high chance.
Yeah, it certainly is. And look at the points differences as well. I mean, 6 of the teams are actually in a positive scenario. Gala aren't far behind on -8 at the moment, -35 for Biggar. And apart from Dundee and GHK, who are -139 for Dundee and 331 for GHK, everyone's been really competitive.
Yeah, they have. It's been an interesting league. I think it goes back to your point about the points tally that the teams have in that middle section, and obviously Highland have been brought back into that. You say GHA have a bonus point win against Glasgow Accies. They're up to third, and then they're only 4 points behind Highland, a team who we were talking about promotion a few weeks ago. You take Ayr out this division, you put somebody else in it, that becomes a competitive league now. And at the top of that division, it could be anybody's from 7th all the way up to 1st, but the lie of the land that we've got is Ayr are romping away and the other teams are able to take points off each other. But at the end of the day, like points difference, I think it shows for Ayr because they've been able to sweep a lot of teams aside with relative ease. But it's for the other teams, it's sometimes those games against Ayr or that 1 or 2 games where you've got an absolute touch in means that it's not going to look that favourable. But it's points on the board that you're worried about, and Ayr at the moment are relentless and look like they're steamrolling their way over all of the opposition that's put in front of them.
So we've mentioned Ayr against Gala. Next up is Biggar against Glasgow Accies, 8th against 3rd, and another interesting one this.
Yeah, I think Biggar have hit a bit of form. Obviously got that draw away at Highland last weekend, but from a few weeks ago we were saying there was going to be a victory coming. They were still on the foot of the table. I think that was perhaps 4 games ago. Foot of the table. It was looking quite ominous. All of a sudden they get some players back. They've got 3 wins. They've got a draw in there as well. So they've went through a decent bit of form. If you talk about points difference as well, theirs isn't too bad, and they've had a couple of big touch-ins as well in that period. I know a heavy defeat against Melrose at Hartree Mill. They failed to score a point, and they've got 30 odd points put against them. So they went through a really difficult period and been able to react and get themselves off that foot of the table. It's now about how they can continue to build and build a bit of confidence and get themselves back into the kind of middle section of the league, build a bit of confidence, culture for next year, and they can maybe have a swing at it again. And
Glasgow Accies, have been scoring a lot of points in some of their games, not so in others. They are away from home on this one, so couldn't call that one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a different task for Glasgow Accies to go to Hartree Mill. I do think it is. There's something about Hartree Mill, and I'm not saying this just because it was a Peebles player and it was a derby, but there's something about that atmosphere and being more towards the west that makes it really intimidating as a place to play. Ayr have it. They have it in spades as well. In terms of going there, that kind of shock of going into an environment. Actually, the worst thing for Biggar that's happened is they've had a bit of a cash injection at that place. It's actually made it more welcoming. But it's a difficult place to play. Like the bigger club, the culture that they have there, and the supporters and the committee that they have they're really passionate about their club, and it does show when you step out of the changing rooms. I played social sevens there as well, and you still get pelters. They're really passionate about their club, so that's something that Glasgow Accies will have to deal with, travelling to Hartree Mill to try and pick up a victory. It is a difficult one to call, but you wouldn't say that a bigger win would be a surprise, even though they're sitting in 8th in the table.
GHA versus Watsonians, who've come into a little bit of form as of late. It's 7th against 5th. GHA in 7th place. You wouldn't have predicted that early in the season, because obviously they came down from the Premiership, and many people tipping them to bounce straight back, which hasn't happened.
Yeah, and you take Ayr out the equation, they're still not really as consistent or as high flying as we thought they perhaps could have been coming down from the Premiership. But it does just show what it can do to a club is losing your status. And we've talked about this about Jed for the last few weeks, is what's going to happen to that club. I think it's a different makeup in Jedforest than perhaps GHA, but sometimes you get a conveyor belt of talent coming through. If they're not playing Premiership rugby, they maybe want to do that and they'll seek it elsewhere. So losing a few key personnel can mean that perhaps the wheels do fall off, and they've been able to consolidate, which is positive, because again, as a proud club that GHA are, they'll be wanting to try and get back up to the Premiership. And you just look National 1 now, though, the names that are in there. Jedforest coming down, they're going to swap. They're going to swap with Ayr, aren't they? But you look at the teams in there: Melrose, Watsonians, Gala, GHA, and you could argue bigger as well. Put Jedforest in that. They're really historic clubs that will be fighting hammer and tong next season. But obviously this year they've still got a game in the middle of the table to compete with, and it's going to be another difficult one against Watsonians on Saturday. And again, comes back to your point, they're all taking points off each other in the middle of the table, and another year it could make the top of the table in National 1 a lot more interesting, but Ayr have just spoiled it for everybody.
They have, but down the bottom end it's very interesting, because we have GHK in 10th against Dundee in 9th, 5 points separating them. So if GHK get a home win here with a 5 point, all of a sudden both on 18 potentially, and that one really warming up.
This is a huge game. You do look at National 1, and really there's only 3 teams I'm looking at now: Ayr to see how they're getting on, and Dundee and GHK at the bottom. And then you look at this fixture, and this is going to have a huge impact in terms of how the rest of the season's going to pan out. Because if Dundee can go to GHK and get something, now they've got a 5 point cushion at the moment. If they're able to get something, if that be a victory, if it's a bonus point, 2 bonus points, stop them getting a bonus point victory. If they're able to still have a little cushion going into next weekend, then I would say it's job done for Dundee. They've achieved something. But the GHK have to win. It is a home game against your nearest rival. There's no other outcome for them. They have to win. They have to win and get a 4 point swing. So if they get 4 points and Dundee get 1, for me it's just not really good enough. These games, you need to be making sure that you're ruthless and you're keeping as many points off the opposition as possible. So huge weekend for both of those clubs.
Melrose against Highland is the other fixture. Battle of the teams of the plastic pitches. Let's find out what Melrose head coach Ian Chisholm has to say this week.
Really hopeful that we're able to beat the weather and frost this weekend. Welcome Malpals, Highland down to the Green Yards, and look, they're going pretty well. They're not scoring an awful lot of points, but they've been pretty rock solid defensively, and I think they've probably suffered with a bit of player availability and injuries. I know that they're really missing big Stuart Watson in the front row, and while it would be great for us for him not to be there, I think getting him back in the starting lineup will be really important for them. They've probably been more consistent this year than they have been in previous years, and I definitely think player usage helps towards that. If you look at the teams that got promoted or were pretty successful last year, I think Hawick, Kelso, Glasgow Hawks, I think they used around about the 30 player mark, and if we're going to be successful going forward, we need to start getting a bit of consistency within our squad as well. I think every week we're having to change about 4 or 5 bodies, either through work, through injury, through availability, and I think this weekend's no different. The week off has really helped us get boys off the injury bed, get boys going again. We've got Rory Lindsay back in the mix. Will Ferry will play for the Storm this weekend because he's at a wedding on Saturday. We've got guys like Connor Spence back in the mix, Bruce Colvin. He's now a father, so he might be available come Saturday. We're not going to put any pressure on him to do that. We've got Struan Hutchison back. He was at Dubai Sevens last weekend. So yeah, we've got a lot of bodies ready to play this weekend, and we're pretty excited to try and put a performance together. I love what we do with the ball. The bit that we're worried about at the moment is when the ball goes out. Are we going to take action to the things that we've been saying over the last couple of weeks around our maul defence and our defence off touchlines primarily? That's something that we're actually quite good at, and I think we probably just had an off day. But for me, especially last night training wise, we had a really good session on the Green Yards, and before that we met as a group as we try to do most weeks, and we just went over key key messages around our attack, key messages around our defence. You know, what are we looking to do when they kick to us? What are some key phrases, key energisers that we're going to use at set piece to just get us back in the game? We're waiting on a few boys becoming available after medical. Gershon McKendy, he's struggling with a hamstring and a shoulder injury. He would be a massive help for us coming forward. Based on the performance up at Canal Park, look, we still gave ourselves an opportunity to win the game despite playing with 13 men for a large part of that. You know, we had a scrum that was going backwards at a rate of knots, and the pleasing thing for me is that, like, we're working things out in the hoof. We're finding solutions to the problems that we've got. The guys they're getting their heads together, they're hot reviewing, and they're just coming up with an action plan to take us forward. And look, that's as a coaching group, we can't be there to give them answers all the time. You know, we have to empower them to make decisions themselves without actually coming to us and saying, what do you think of this? You know, we need them to show a bit of intent themselves and a bit of endeavour themselves, and we see that quite often from them. But of course, it's about putting actions to our words. You know, we've been hurt a few times this season. Glasgow Hawks, one of them. Bigger at home was another one, and Ayr away was another one, and every week it's a new set of 7. It's a new opportunity for us to have a go and try and meet our performance measures and let people enjoy pulling on the jersey with their pals.
Ian Chisholm, and today's quiz, where was he actually doing his soundbite from this week? Any ideas? We've seen him do the dishes, record one in the car.
Yeah, I think he was at the play park. You heard him going down the slide, you know, and there was a bit when he was pushing the kids off the swing. So, yeah, I think he was at the Melrose play park across from the Green Yard. So,
you think so? Yeah, we'll check that out later.
Not a long walk, but it was great.
Multitasking.
Yeah, but it was, you know, again, great insight from Ian about the squad, the player makeup, but also I think at the end, you know, it was really good to hear him talking about, you know, bringing a bit of enjoyment, pulling on the jersey and playing rugby with your mates. And I think, you know, that's sometimes lost, and, you know, even sometimes when I'm speaking about it, it is lost about really that is the be all and end all of club rugby, is making sure that you're entertaining the people that are paying to watch you play rugby, but ultimately you're enjoying what you're doing. You know, we sometimes get a little bit too serious. But in terms of Melrose, a game which probably will suit Ian Chisholm as well, because he has a big insight in terms of the way that Highland are as a club and the way that they carry themselves. So, you know, it gives them a little bit of an upper hand, but it's another game that is going to be a big challenge for them, and it's just the sign of the times. You know, Highland have been really consistent, as Ian alluded to. The wheels have slightly come off of their quest, you know, to keep a bit of pressure on Ayr at the top. So, you know, as you say, a bit of a dead rubber, but a lot to play for still, you know, for both sides as they look to find a bit of consistency.
National 2 then, and this is a real north-south divide. Falkirk at the top, 47 points. Peebles, 46. Newton Stewart, 45. Lasswade, 43. That's not a bad top of the table. Gordonians are in 5th on 35, and then a big drop of 14 points to Stirling County in 6th with 21. Kirkcaldy 20. Stuart's Melville 17. They would be on 20 had they not had 3 points docked early in the season. Berwick 14 and Aberdeen Grammar 10. It really is hotting up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting league, you know, and you look at some of the games that have happened, and teams at the top have taken points off each other. So, you know, Peebles, Falkirk, Newton Stewart, Lasswade, you know, they're all at the top of the table. They've all lost 2 games. You know, Newton Stewart and Lasswade have drawn 1 as well. So it means that they could ultimately be a little bit higher or a little bit lower in the league. So, you know, depending on the swing of the way that those games went. But, you know, the lie of the land is that they've all been able to take points off each other, and you see that going for the foreseeable. Huge games coming up in the league. You know, even at the bottom of the table, you know, I'm kind of fixated on the top because I've obviously got a connection to Peebles, but, you know, towards the bottom, Stirling County, I think unrealistically they're not going to be dragged back into it, but you could argue that Kirkcaldy could be. You know, a couple of good results and they're dragged back into a relegation battle. So, you know, there's probably 2 teams there that are really just in no man's land, Gordonians and Stirling County. The other teams have a lot of rugby left to play, which makes the league and the 10-team league so interesting.
So it's Aberdeen Grammar against Newton Stewart. Looks like a 4-pointer to me, at least, for Newton Stewart. Of course, they have played that 1 game more, so getting points at Aberdeen is pretty much essential for them.
Yeah, it is, but Aberdeen, they gave Peebles a lot of problems a couple of weeks ago, and it was a game that was closer than perhaps that they would have thought it, especially at half-time. Peebles did draw away from them in the end, so Aberdeen can put in a performance, and it's maybe just one game that they're going to need to get up for to give them that little bit of momentum and take it off the foot of the table. But as you say, Newton Stewart, it's a long travel for them as well. It always is to Aberdeen, and Newton Stewart are no, they're no exception to that travel to go to Ruby's Law to play Aberdeen. So, obviously they've got that travel to contend with. 2 o'clock kick-off, early start for Newton Stewart. But you would imagine that they start that as favourites. But you do mention that they've played a game more. It doesn't really matter. They've got points on the board. I think that's the important thing that matters here. The teams round about them, all round about them have played 11 games. So, yeah, they've got points on the board, and it'll be interesting to see where that takes them.
Berwick will play Lasswade. Berwick back at Scremerston. Here's forwards coach Paul Pringle.
So this Saturday we'll welcome Lasswade down to Scremerston, what will definitely be a fairly keenly contested affair. We've had really, really close games with Lasswade over the last couple of seasons. They've always been, good games, plenty of tries, and really kind of strong matches. So we're not expecting anything less. They're obviously having a pretty good season. We're probably on the other end of the table, but yeah, it was very, very close up there, as you've seen earlier in the season. And bounce of the ball, the right decision taken by us at key critical moments of the match, and it might have been a different result. So we know we can definitely compete with them, and we're just really looking forward to getting this match on. It was disappointing last week that we the game fell foul of the weather where we were going up to Falkirk, but it gives us an opportunity to get a game back at Scremerston on what is ex-Players' Day. So yeah, you always get that. There's always the added incentive that there's many ex-players there watching who I'm sure will offer a raft of advice to the lads in the clubhouse afterwards. So I'm sure that they'll want to put a show on, one where they can go into the clubhouse with heads held high. Selection-wise, we're pretty largely unchanged from the last couple of games. We should be fairly settled now. We're still waiting on a late injury assessment on Captain Ali Grieve, whether he can return to the fold or not. That shouldn't impact things too much. We'll continue on. We have preparations either way as to who can step into that fold. So I'm sure that whoever that is will do a good job should he fail that fitness test. But yeah, we're just looking forward to getting this game on, getting a home game, and hopefully putting on a performance that the lads can be proud of.
Paul Pringle. Now this season we've seen Berwick leave a lot of points out on the pitch, including that match at Kirkcaldy that he was talking about there. There's been some good battles though between these two over the past few years.
Yeah, I think this is again one of those games that does suit Berwick. The Lasswade are a big pack, got a lot of experience there as well. Quite forward dominated, and that's a bit of the Peter Wright influence as well. So, I think Berwick will welcome this tie more than some of the other games against the likes of Falkirk, who have got electric backs, and potentially Peebles as well, who like to play quite a frenetic offloading game. So, against Lasswade, that's not to say they're not able to mix up their game, but they are very forward driven, and Berwick will probably lap that up, and that's one of those games that this might provide a little bit of a curveball this weekend. I do, I'm not saying that the Berwick start as favourites, but it's one of those games that could be a really tricky one for Lasswade. With that in mind as well, it's one of those games that Lasswade need to win to keep the pressure on at the top. There's a big game coming up for them in a few weeks' time, because they've got to welcome Peebles at Hawthornden. They've got to go to there. So to make that count and that matter, they need to be winning this game on the road against Berwick. I
was down actually in Lasswade this morning doing a little bit of a recce at Hawthornden, and looking forward to that one, because that will be one of our featured matches on next week's Rugby Radio, which will be Lasswade at home to Peebles, and that could be an absolute cracker. Looking forward to that one, and then we'll have the second half commentary of Kelso and Marr as well, so plenty to look forward to in next week's Rugby Radio programme. This Saturday, of course, it's Selkirk versus Kelso, but Gordonians against Stirling County, 5th versus 6th in this one. Craig Deakins is the head coach of Stirling.
Also, we played Gordonians earlier on in the season, and it was one of their games that we really didn't play very well. However, like, massive credit to Gordonians, they were extremely clinical that day, and they're one of the teams that really sticks out in my mind that have probably been one of the better teams that we've played this year. And I'm to be fair, I'm a bit surprised they're sitting in 5th position. However, you know, we're expecting a tough game this weekend up the road for them. You know, we know what to expect from them. We know the pitch up there, they've actually got a really good pitch. Probably one of the better pitches that will be in this league, to be fair. So I think that might actually play into our favour, especially the kind of rugby we were looking to play, especially with the back line that we've got. We've got a strong selection this weekend coming up. I think a couple of weeks off. It's probably been actually quite good. You know, guys have been in the gym, guys have been in the training pitch, you know, putting in the units. So it's been actually really good. So we're going up the road this weekend, making amends for what we did earlier on in the season against them, and looking to hopefully bridge that gap from 5th to 6th place that we're in at the moment.
Craig Deakins, the Stirling County head coach, I mentioned it's 5th against 6th here, but 14 points between them in the league.
Yeah, I think Stirling County just haven't been as consistent as I think they would like to have been. Obviously finding things difficult in this division, and they've not been able to find that consistency. Where Gordonians have taken the national to like a duck to water. They had a difficult start against Peebles. Obviously got that defeat, and after that they did go on a really good run of form. So you know they have had, when you look at the table, they've almost had opposite campaigns, because Gordonians have won 7, lost 4, where Stirling County, you flip that, they've won 4 and lost 7. So that shows you where the gulf is. Not too far in terms of bonus points picked up as well, but you know they've been slightly different. I think a lot of consistency from Gordonians as well. They've been tricky customers to deal with, especially at home. You know, you hear Craig Deakins speaking there about the fact that they've got a really good pitch. Now that is something that the Gordonians, you know, do pride themselves on, making sure that they make their home form count, and I think that they have been relatively consistent. They've just probably dropped out over the last few weeks, which means that they're probably out of the conversation of that championship and promotion battle.
Kirkcaldy versus Stuart's Melville. Now, we've been waiting for this one after Stu Mel threw away a 35-5 lead to lose at Inverleith early in the season. So they'll be on a mission. Here's head coach of Stu Mel, Alex Haggart.
Look, we've got a huge 2 weeks coming up. Kirkcaldy this weekend and Stirling the next weekend. 10 points against the two teams directly above us, both of whom at this moment in time are within touching distance. That could make a massive dent in where we sit at the end of this year. I think the first thing to probably do is address the fact, like, you know, we sat and we addressed it in the immediate aftermath, and we've addressed it this week about the Kirkcaldy game that we played. You know, it's embarrassing shipping 30 points, and we know it was embarrassing. And I think the boys have been fuelled enormously since then. I think since that game we've won 3 out of 6 that we've played. So the boys are hurting, and they're absolutely desperate to right those wrongs. So, you know, I think that spurred us on massively. We've also addressed it from the fact that we know what's probably going to come at us. The reality was, like, Kirkcaldy in the sort of last 50 of the game completely battered us up front, and we spoke about what will they be saying in their changing room. They will be saying, and they will have said after the game, that we are soft, and they will have said before this game that we are soft. And I think from our perspective, you know, we ultimately in that game merited that tag. So from us, it's about making sure that that's not how we're perceived, and that's not how we are in this game. We know Kirkcaldy have got a great maul. We know they've got a great scrum. We know that they're really smart with their changes, and they rotate a lot, and they get their big men on and off and keep them fresh. Like, we're aware of that, and we're also aware of how we can potentially cause them problems. They're also a side who are not just a scrum and a maul. They're a side who can play a bit of rugby. You don't score 47, 50 points like they have done twice this year if you've not got that ability. So from our perspective, we know that they have that. And we know that we're gonna have to be on top of our game to come out with anything. But I think the most important thing for us is going there and giving as good account of ourselves as we possibly can. And I think from our own point of view, probably putting to bed some of the demons that we maybe had last time out, because that hurt, that stung. You know, like, a lot of egos and a lot of pride was dented. A lot of egos were dented, but, you know, we've got the opportunity this time to regain a wee bit of pride, and I think that's what we're going up to Beveridge Park on Saturday afternoon to do.
Yes, and that led, of course, that defeat to the legendary soundbite from Alex Haggart as well, and hopefully he won't have to go through that again. But that was some soundbite. We keep talking about it. Everyone keeps talking about it. Alex Haggart, though, really passionate about his rugby, and obviously eyeing up there a away win at Beveridge Park.
Yeah, I think he spent a lot of time speaking about Kirkcaldy there, and there's probably nothing for me to add. I'm in total agreement. They've always traditionally been a big forward pack that play to their strengths and play really well. So for Stuart's Melville, from their point of view, is the fact that they do have a lot of good players, particularly in the second row, the back row, that are slightly different forwards to what Kirkcaldy can offer. They're probably a little bit more rounded in terms of, not shape, I mean of ability. So they're able to probably link up a little bit more with the backs, and I think that's where Stuart's Melville are going to find a little bit of joy. And Haggart being an ex-fly half, he wants to probably have that expansive play in Stuart's Melville's makeup. And there's a lot of players, especially in the midfield for Stuart's Melville as well, that they're direct runners, but they're really difficult. They're very abrasive. So they'll be wanting to try and utilise that, stretch Kirkcaldy, get them running about, because if they know that Kirkcaldy are going to come with, a big pack that they're going to rotate and keep them fresh, you need to run the legs off them. And that is the game plan that Stuart's Melville are going to have to try and deploy at Beveridge Park, which is no easy task, because that's speaking as if Stuart's Melville are going to have complete control of the game. Kirkcaldy are going to want to stamp their own authority on, and they'll look to do that up front.
And of course, if Stirling do lose at Gordonians, there is a chance that Stuart's Melville could jump a couple of places, in fact, and take over from Kirkcaldy and Stirling County into 6th place.
Yeah, there is, and I think for Stuart's Melville it would give them a little bit of, especially with results elsewhere, with the Berwick and Aberdeen games. If those teams can get victories or pick up some points, it does put a little bit of daylight, and it does then segregate this league a little bit more. We'd have a kind of, the top 4 would have the middle section, then 2 at the bottom. So certainly a big weekend coming up for those teams.
The other match, of course, Peebles against Falkirk, second against first, 1 point difference only between the two, and Peebles won at Falkirk earlier in the season. So can they do the double? And if they win, of course, they could go top. Well, we haven't heard this week from Peebles boss Graham Patterson, so we'll have to chat about it ourselves. And this is a real must-win game for both.
It's a game that is really intriguing on lots of aspects, because at the top of that division, teams have won away from home against their rivals, and this game is no exception, because Peebles won away to Falkirk. Peebles were beaten at home against Lasswade. So this is a game that if they've got any aspirations of going up, they need to win. Now, not to give too much away about Peebles, but I think they know the importance of this game, and a lot of the destiny and where they want to go as a club probably lies a lot around this fixture, because if they want to keep some of their talented youngsters and keep them in the club and give them a better level of rugby, they need to win this game and give themselves that real platform to push on and go into National 1. Now, it's not an easy task, because Falkirk have got electric backs, but I think Peebles think that there's a lot of joy to be had up front. I think Cameron Pye in the back of that Peebles pack is, he symbolises as to what Peebles will look to try and do against Falkirk and get a lot of joy up front, but they know how potent Falkirk are in behind that scrum. They've got really, really good backs. A lot of other teams in the division speak about how lethal they can be in behind that scrum. So there's a lot riding on this game. Years gone by, Peebles and Falkirk have had a lot of ding-dong battles, and some of them have been one-sided. I remember drawing with Falkirk when they had a really phenomenal team years ago, where it was one of those really interesting battles again, and I think they got promoted that year, or they weren't far off it. But there's a bit of history between these two sides, and you would think this weekend Peebles for me need to win this game. I think if Falkirk win, they've got one foot going into National 1. So it's whoever can get the victory this weekend is probably taking advantage.
Plenty of rugby still left in National 2, plenty of rugby in National 3 as well. Let's have a look at the table. Preston Lodge at the top, 49 points. Orkney in second, but with a game in hand, 46. Allen Glens 41, Howe 5 39, Boroughmuir 34, Hillhead Jordanhill 32, Dumfries 17, West of Scotland 15, Cartha Queen's Park 14, and Hamilton with just 9 points at the bottom of the table. This week it's Cartha Queen's Park against Hamilton, so it's 9th against 10th there. Dumfries versus Allen Glens, 7th against 3rd. Howe 5 v Preston Lodge, 4th against 1st. A potential banana skin for Preston Lodge there. Orkney against Boroughmuir, second against fifth, unbeaten still, of course, and a 1 o'clock kick-off for that game. And West of Scotland against Hillhead Jordan Hill, that's 8th against 6th place. So what stands out for you? Certainly for me, it's Orkney again against Boroughmuir, Howe Fife against Preston Lodge, and at the bottom end, Cartha against Hamilton. And Hamilton, who haven't scored any points after the first part of the season where they got 9 bonus points, still without a win, of course, but have really fallen off the pace lately.
I think out with we were kind of robbed of the PL Orkney game last weekend because of the weather. That was geared up to be a huge clash at the top of the table. So we're going to have to wait a little bit until we see that fixture. But I agree. I think Cartha Queen's Park versus Hamilton is one of the games that stands out. There's a lot riding on it, and I think this weekend there's a lot of games with a lot riding on it now as we enter a really pivotal stage of the season where we can see a clear mapping now. I don't think we're under any illusions at this stage of the season as to where these games can go and who starts as favourites, but certainly in that one, Cartha Queen's Park versus Hamilton's an intriguing fixture. Hamilton yet to win. They've still got 9 points, but they're yet to win a game this season. They're playing the team just above them. They're only 5 points away. And Cartha Queen's Park have picked up 2 victories. So, to still have a lifeline in this league is phenomenal. So, a lot riding on that game. But, again, the 2 main teams at the moment in the hunt for promotion, Orkney and PL, have got different challenges ahead of them. I think Preston Lodge going to Duffus Park to play Howe Fife is a huge game because Howe Fife welcomed Orkney a few weeks ago. They just missed out on a victory on that occasion. Orkney escaped with to remain unbeaten. They had the victory there, so another big challenge for PL, whereas as Boroughmuir have to get on the boat and they have to get to Orkney for a 1pm kickoff. So slightly different challenges for both of those sides, but ultimately the same goal of picking up a victory.
National 4, the league looks like this. Garnock still unbeaten at the top, one of just 3 teams unbeaten out of the 50 teams in the Premiership and National Leagues. Garnock 10 out of 10, 49 points, just dropped 1 try bonus in their campaign so far. Strathmore 41, White Craigs 41, but Strathmore have played 1 game less. North Berwick 31, Stuart 30, Dunfermline 27, Greenock Wanderers 20, the same as Murrayfield Wanderers, Perthshire 16 and Ross High have 11, and the fixtures are headed with Garnock versus Greenock, first against 7th there. Garnock 8 points clear at the top, should be a home win.
Yeah, you would imagine that'll be another home win for Garnock, and obviously Greenock, not being able to hit their straps this season, find themselves kind of loitering round towards the bottom of the table. But yeah, Garnock, they've only been unable to pick up a try bonus in one of their games, and that weekend the weather wasn't too kind of conducive to fast flowing rugby. So you would suggest that's going to be another victory for Garnock.
Murrayfield Wanderers take on White Craigs, that's 8th against 3rd. North Berwick v Strathmore, 4th against 2nd. Perthshire v Ross High, again bottom of the table clash, 9th against 10th. And Stuart versus Dunfermline, which is a mid-table match, 5th against 6th.
Yeah, I think, you look at those fixtures and, the ones that you kind of alluded to after the Garnock one is the Perthshire Ross High game is in the same conversation as Cartha Queen's Park versus Hamilton in the division above. And, it's a game like to GHK and Dundee in National 1. I think this is a weekend where there's going to be a lot of pivotal games for where clubs are going to be playing the rugby next year. So a lot of relegation battles in the kind of top 5 leagues in amateur rugby. Still a lot to play for at the top as well, but certainly Perthshire and Ross High at the bottom of our kind of pyramid in the national landscape. A big game coming up for them.
And Ross High do have that game in hand, so could actually equal Perthshire, and Perthshire on the end of some huge defeats lately as well. So Ross High will take a lot from that.
Yeah, I think they will, but it's going to be a different game. It's going to be a scrappy game. It's not going to be. I don't think real form can come into it. It's just who can keep their bottle for the longest in this fixture. Now, obviously, it's one of those games that you probably even having home advantage goes out the window because there's almost that the bigger element of pressure on you as well. So there's a lot that you could start to dissect from the games at the bottom of the table and in the national picture, but certainly for Ross High, Perthshire, if they want to stay in the division, they know they need to win.
Well, that's just about it for today on the Scottish Club Rugby podcast. Don't forget, Rugby Radio on Saturday will be coming from Philippoch for the Premiership game between Selkirk and Kelso. We'll be speaking with the Scottish Rugby Union President, Colin Rigby, too. He's opening the refurbished stand at Selkirk. We'll also have live commentary of that one with Ewan Welsh and Scott Tomlinson in the commentary box. We start at 1:30 and we'll be on the air all the way through until 5 o'clock. Also an interesting conversation with Stephen Turnbull, one of our top referees in the area, about refereeing in general. So stay tuned for that one. That was something I recorded earlier on, and well worth a listen. There'll be television highlights on Borders Rugby TV of Selkirk against Kelso, and as always, check out our website at rugbyradio.co.uk for all the information that you need on the 50 clubs playing national rugby in Scotland this season. If you want to get in touch, the address as usual is podcast@bordersrugby.net. But from Dale Clancy and myself, bye for now.